right, everybody. Good morning, and thank you again for joining me. Got one more talk coming up, and that talk I'm going to try to have the Samsung and the Cooper Hunter, so that way I can show you how to install that condensation pump on both of those units, not just on the Samsung or this Cooper Hunter. So that'll be kind of fun. That'll be there won't be any slides in that. Unfortunately, today there's just so much information. I do have to have some slides for you, but at least I can start you guys off with an inspirational quote. And my inspirational quote is, if you think you're too small to make a difference, try sleeping with a mosquito. And that's the Dalai Lama. Very wise, very wise, very wise quote. So let's go ahead and move on here. So before, one thing I want you guys, last time I know you guys kind of screaming at me to take it off the covers of the unit. So I am going to try to get through this, and I'll allot enough time at the end so you guys can get a nice close look at this multi-position air handler on the inside. So just hang tight, and we'll get to it as fast as I can get through these slides. So first I want to start off is, what can I do? Can I do this, or what should I do, and should I, right? Because I hear a lot of people say, oh, well, can I do this? Is this possible, right? Well, there's a lot of things that are possible, not necessarily mean that you should. Like, you can take a condenser from a Rude and, pipe it into a bar unit that has a failed condensing coil and use it to work as its condensing coil. So that's a lovely little picture. You can see that in Margate, Florida. That was a job I was at. So that's something you can do, but should you? Probably not. Next, can I mount the indoor unit outside and the outdoor unit inside? Yeah, you could. And in all intents and purposes, it probably would work, right? Because you just have to put it, the condenser, if you put the condenser, if you put it in heat, you'll get cooling in the inside. So you just have to reverse the modes. But should I? No. Can I install, work on a unit with, my buddies without using a ladder? Yeah, you absolutely can. But again, not something you should do. Can I use the mounting bolts on a condenser to mount it to the wall? I mean, you can, but is that something you should do? Of course, definitely should not do. And last but least, I'm not proud to admit this, but this was from one of my guys when I was contracting, and I had some of my technicians, and he told me he had a leak and that he could fix it. Well, this is what he did. Yeah, so can you do stuff? Yeah, you can do certain things. Should you do things? Not always, right? So now we're going to go and get into the real stuff here. Okay. Samsung has a list of its installation best practices. A lot of these things you guys already know. I do want to start off with the survey question before we get into it, and this is probably something you guys already know. So I don't know if, Nicole, if you can put that survey question up. Knowing that the EEV is located in the condenser, what should your primary concern be when running the copper line set? You guys go ahead and take a second and put your answers into that on that poll. Actually, looks like I can vote too, so great. All right.
I'll give them one more second to answer, and then I can kind of close the poll.
No problem.
I'm going to go ahead and end it now, and then I'll share the results so you can see.
Great, yes. Both things are actually important, right? It's very obviously the primary one I think most people are going to think of is insulating both lines, but you also want to size the copper lines correctly because you don't have a true liquid line. You need to make sure that whatever the manufacturer recommends when it comes to line set sizing, that you adhere to that, because if you don't, you could just run into all kinds of issues. If you oversize your lines, you're going to have problems. So yes, absolutely. That's both would be the correct answer. But good job, guys. All right, here we go. Installation best practices, having the correct tools. We all know micron gauge, vacuum pump, deburring tools, good flaring tools, torque wrench. Torque wrench, most of us aren't going to have that out there. I didn't have it out there, so but if you can afford one and you can get them for your guys, then I definitely recommend it. Downloading the Samsung HVAC mobile app is going to have a lot of information for you. Reviewing the submittals, that's going to give you your pipe set lengths and all your tolerances and additional freon if you need it. Obviously using ACR copper, both lines must be fully insulated, as we mentioned. using the 14-3 stranded wire for your power from indoor to outdoor. It's very important. I'll probably mention this a couple times along the way that you power your indoor unit from the outdoor unit, even though we're on a multi-position air handler and it looks like a regular air handler, you need to treat it as a high wall. So you need to think of it as a high wall because it doesn't have the expansion valve in it. The EEV is still in the condenser. That ground wire is part of the communication, and we also have, which does come up every once in a while, the issue of powering each unit individually. If one should suffer power surge or have slightly less voltage, that's going to affect the DC communication voltage. So you could come across random communication errors. So that's why it's important that you power the multi-position air handler in all mini split systems, that you power them from, well, at least on the residential and light commercial side, that you power the indoor units from the condenser. The 16-2 stranded shielded wire, that's just for a good peace of mind and make sure we have a good solid communication without interference. No filter dryers, no sight glasses, no copper tees, no aluminum tubing. Those are things that Samsung and just about every mini split manufacturer is going to recommend, that you don't use filter dryers or sight glass. There's no reason to use a sight glass because you don't have a true liquid line, right? Because the EEV is in the condenser. Knowing your maximum minimum line sets are important. Knowing the length that the unit's charged for. So if you need that additional refrigerant, you can. And that's going to go back. You're going to find that information in your submittals. Set to cool heating after 12 minutes of operation. You check the temperature, the drop rise, your delta T, and cooling is going to be equal to or greater than 18. And in heating, it's going to be equal or greater than 19. During the heat mode, the fan will delay until the indoor coil is at 85 degrees. That's important because I have taken a couple calls where the installing servicing technician says, "Hey, listen, it cools, but now we got this cold front and it's not heating, and the condenser comes on, but the indoor fan doesn't come on." Well, if that indoor coil doesn't reach a certain temperature, that indoor fan will not come on. In those situations, there's a good chance you have a freon leak. So if you come across a mini split system, at least with the Samsungs, I'm not sure what Cooper Hunter's indoor coil temperature setting is before the fan comes on, but I know with Samsung, it's 85 degrees. So if you're not hitting 85-degree coil, that fan will not come on. So you need to check your flares and do a leak check. Let's see here. It's not letting me. There we go. Maintain proper separation between your line voltage and communication wire within reason. We don't want to see people using and this is really, especially with Samsung, you really don't want to be running your communication wire and like zip tying them together, having them super close. If they're in the same chase, you'll be fine. I wouldn't worry too much about that. You don't want any wire nuts. You do not want to extend the communication wire whatsoever. You want it to be one solid run from the indoor to the outdoor. And if you are going to ground the shield, we only ground the shielding at the condenser. We do not ground it at the indoor units. Refrigerant lines, good flare connections, properly torqued, correct value. These are all things just to help you avoid leaks. Use a dedicated circuit breaker. That's basically a given. Make sure your outdoor unit is placed level and not screwed to the wall like in that picture that we saw earlier. Samsung requires three-step nitro leak. What I really want to get you to understand through this is I've seen 200 and 300, or 200, 400, 600, and I hear 100, 300, and 600. You know, for me, to you guys, you know, put 100 or 200 psi. If you don't hear anything, I would just say bump it up to 600 psi. I mean, time, you know, I just don't. Me personally, 5 minutes, and 1 hour, let it. If you have an hour, right? But in the summertime when we're banging and we're trying to get these installs going, you may not have all this. If you followed all the recommendations, which you should follow recommendations, but listen, I'm a contractor. I was an installer. I was a technician. Get up to 600 psi. Check your leak. You know, if you want to put some trace gas in there, get your leak detector out. Get your bubbles out. Check your flares. And then move on to the next step. The most important one out of these is making sure you get that 600 psi, and then above and beyond that is the 500 microns. Get that system down to 500 microns. Do a decay test. and then you should be good. If you can hit those two and pass those two tests, then chances are you're not going to have any problems. Okay, Samsung, the multi-position air handler. There are differences, right? This looks like an air handler for all intents and purposes. It is basically an air handler. As you'll see, it has an X13 motor, constant torque motor, has a coil. It basically looks just like a standard air handler, but there are some differences, right? So this air handler, it's a heat pump. So you're not going to need the auxiliary heater because the system doesn't have an emergency heat function. That I know it says 22 degrees ambient, but you do get 100% capacity heating below that. So there really is no need for an additional heater. If for some reason you guys do want an additional heat kit, that is something that can be purchased and installed after. That would have to be powered separately, but we can. You'll see when I start going over a little bit, I'll show you where the heater goes. The expansion valve, it's in the outdoor unit, like we mentioned earlier. The line sets both line sets have to be insulated, and the outdoor unit requires flares, but the indoor unit is their sweat-in fittings. So low flow nitro is really going to be your best friend here. We do also sell the Zoom Lock fittings. So if you're in a situation where maybe there's smoke detectors or whatever it is, and you can't, you don't want to do a fire watch, you can cut off the ends and you can use the Zoom Lock fittings. The air handler is powered from the outdoor unit, very important. If you're putting an additional heat kit in there, then you're going to have to power that separately. The heat kit will not need to be powered by the condenser, nor should it be. The indoor breaker is no longer required unless the supplement heat kit is installed. The air handler fits our current roof filter racks, which is great because the current roof filter racks and I'll show it to you later, they're about 2.5 inches or 3 inches tall, I think, but they accept a 2-inch filter. If you're familiar with inverter systems, you'll know that one of the Achilles heel to an inverter system is airflow. So take advantage of that, use a 2-inch filter. The drain line, the float switch plugs into a special connection. It's going to be labeled CN83, which I'm going to show you that a little later. You basically plug it in, you cut the end of the connector out, and then you're going to wire that in. There is an alternate method of wiring a float switch. If for some reason you don't have that little connector that plugs in the board, I'll show you, like I said, a little later, where you basically just tap in the return air thermistor, and you can go in line with that. And if the float switch sees an overflow safety situation, then it'll break that return air temperature sensor, and that'll send an error code and shut the system down. The preferred thermostat is the advanced wire controller. I'll go over that and tell you why. The air handler uses a 3-speed constant torque X13 motor rated up to 0.8 inches water column on a 1.5 to 2 ton, and 1-inch water column on a 2.5 to 4 ton. So that 0.8 to 1.5 to 2 is important, and you want to know that. Hint, hint. There is no humidistat that's built into this, the advanced wire controller or the air handler. It doesn't really have the ability to monitor humidity. It does have algorithms set up to focus on trying to dehumidify the space as much as possible. If you are going to install the system in a downflow situation, you will need a downflow installation kit. And unfortunately, there are no longer, hopefully in the future, they will have 5 tons, but they do not have 5-ton systems available at this moment. But as we get into later on, you'll see that how we can utilize this multi-position air handler as part of a multi-zone system to be able to zone a home without having to modify the ductwork. So that's definitely something that I'm excited to see how we can make use of that in the future. The nomenclature here, here's a picture of the outside of the cabinet. The main numbers I want you to focus on that you're really going to need to know are the first two. That's going to let you know if it's a light commercial, residential, AC, which is a CAC models of the Samsung systems, and that's your light commercial. And then your next 3 digits, that's your capacity. Letters, that's going to be the year. That's not necessarily the year it was manufactured. That's more of the model year that you have, and then it just kind of breaks its way down. And then the third letter after the size of capacity is something else that's going to be useful for you. That's going to let you know what type of indoor unit. So if somebody gives you a model number, you can look at that third letter and you'll know exactly what we have. A Z here, so that Z is the air handling unit with fresh air. And that's another thing, that this is capable of, you are able to wire in fresh air dampers into this. I'm not going to get too into that today, just letting you know that it is something you can do. Here's a quick look on the inside of the cabinet. You have to work your way through here. This is the circuit board, which you'll see a little later, has a transformer. The coil slides out pretty simple. The blower wheel as well, a couple screws, slides out, and then you'll see just like a standard X13 motor, pretty simple. And here I do want to show you some of the sizes so that way you guys start getting an idea of what you're looking at if you're going to go and replace an existing system, or if you're going into new construction or a rebuild. The 18,000 and 24,000 BTU, they're about 43.5 inches tall, not too bad. The 30,000 to 42,000 BTU getting a little taller at 48, almost 49 inches, so that's getting a little taller there. But the 48,000 BTU, that's a big boy. He's almost 60 inches tall, so I could see how that might be a concern, especially if you're going into a home that doesn't have much space in the closet. In a garage application, probably be fine. You have plenty, usually have plenty of room above it, but in a closet, this is a big boy. He might be a little hard to get in there. He's almost 21.5 inches deep, so that's not too bad. And I believe they're about 21, 22 inches wide as well. So the width and the depth aren't too much of an issue, but I could see that height, making your job a little tight. But I think the bigger trains and whatnot, and the bigger roods are pretty close to that as well. So shouldn't be too much a difference. Controller options. Like I said before, the advanced wire controller is the preferred method of controlling the multi-position air handler. It allows you, the installer, to access different options. This is basically, being able to access all these options can allow that installer to custom tailor the functions for that homeowner and what they need. As I mentioned before, there's not a built-in humidistat in that, but it does have algorithms and the ability to I could say, it's not monitoring humidity, but they do a great job of dehumidifying. So at this point, I haven't really seen any issues with that. There are certain things that we can do if you do have a homeowner complaining of high humidity, that we can go ahead and change in the settings. If that's something, you guys know I'm always available for a phone call. Third-party thermostat. This is also an option. It's not recommended, and I'm going to go over reasons why. The use of a third-party thermostat, it's just, there's algorithms and it doesn't directly communicate. So that's, like I said, I'm going to go into that in a little bit. I'll tell you exactly why that's not the best option. If you got a homeowner that's dead set on having one, by all means, give it to them. But as long as you understand how to set it up, then you should be fine. And there obviously is also an optional Wi-Fi adapter that is available. The MIM-H04UN is available for the system, so the homeowner can control this through the app. A system wiring. You see here, you got board here. You have your different connections. Your F1 and F2, that's your communication. It goes back to the condenser. It doesn't have Fs here. You don't need, it just says 3 and 4. But if you look over to the right, your F3 and F4 port, that's going to be used to your controllers. You can control multiple units off one controller by daisy chaining these together. So if you had two systems, whether it's high wall, ceiling cassette, or multi-position air handlers, you could, for all intents and purposes, wire and daisy chain them in, and to be able to control multiple units from one wired controller. The wiring, very basic here. The main point I want you guys to understand, or take the key point I want you to take away from this, is that I want you to power the indoor unit from the condenser. As I mentioned before, that grounding that goes back and forth is utilized as part of the communication. But even more important than that is that we want to make sure the indoor unit and the outdoor unit are at the same voltage, that one isn't slightly above or below the other, because that could create some communication issues down the road. Okay, so now we're going to get into the third-party adapter. This is basically, if you had a Nest thermostat, this is what you'd be looking at. Let me see here real quick. So yeah, you have your Nest thermostat, and then you could wire it up. You would need a thermostat adapter, but you'd also need, as it says here, a 24-volt transformer as well to supply power to the thermostat and the thermostat adapter, which you're going to see right now. Thermostat adapter allows control indoor units with a standard 24-volt thermostat. Think of it as you add this thermostat adapter, and it's basically, you can control the system with a toggle switch if you want, and I'll show you why. Because the thermostat that you're going to add in doesn't communicate temperature. It doesn't, the Samsung system does not know what temperature is being called for. It just knows it's either being called for heat, cool, or fan on. And here's a quick wiring diagram. If you are installing this in a system, you don't need to, you have a Y1 and Y2. I don't recommend the use of a multi-zone thermostat, although you can if you'd like. But what I do recommend, if you're going to install this, that you jumper Y1 and Y2 together, and I'll tell you exactly why in a minute. And the same with W1 and W2. I mean, W1, W2, not too much of, you're really not going to need that unless you're installing an electric heat kit. So I would say, or actually, you're going to need it, but you just jumper those two together. You have your your red and your common. Then you have your 24-volt transformer. Then you have your F3 and F4 that's going to go to the indoor unit. If you have different contacts, there's options, a bunch of different options that you can use on this as well. So here, this is just another screenshot closer up. You have your Y1 and your Y2. You have your multiple fan speeds. Just hook up to G. I wouldn't worry so much about these other ones. I would just hook up to G, jumper Y1 and Y2, jumper W1, W2 together, and then you'll be fine. But more importantly, or actually, let me go back. You see these dials right here. I don't know if you guys can see my laser pointer, but these dials, this is where you're going to set the temperature that the Samsung system is going to see. So basically, if you get a call for cool, depending on what these call for cool is one on the left, RSW1, and call for heat is RSW2. And depending on where you put this dial, it comes preset to 0, that's going to send a preset temperature setting to the Samsung system, whether it's getting a Y1 or Y2 call. And it's kind of why I want you to jump Y1 and Y2. If you look, and it took me a little while to figure this out, but default is 0. So if you only have Y1 hooked up and the homeowner turns their thermostat down to 70 degrees, well, this thermostat adapter is going to send a signal for 73.4 degrees, and it's going to shut off. So if you get a call from a homeowner that you installed one of these in, one of these adapters in their home, and they call you back and say, hey, listen, it's just it just never reaches 70. I don't know what's going on. It's shutting off before. It's because the adapter is only sending a 73-degree call for cool. So by jumpering Y1 and Y2 together, they can go down to 68 degrees. I recommend that you jumper Y1 and Y2 together and you set it to 1, because if Y1 and Y2 are together, it will go down to 64.4 degrees. Good chance you're not going to need to get below that, nor should anybody really be turning their AC down below that, because then you can run into ice up issues and all other sorts of trouble. So if you're installing one of these, jumper Y1 and Y2 together and then set it to 1. So that way, if the homeowner wants to go down to 68, it will achieve 64 degrees. So very important that if you have installers out there and you're going to send them out there with a Wi-Fi adapter kit, this is part of the instruction manual, so they can look in the instruction manual, but the instructions aren't really all that clear. At least it wasn't for me. So if you have any questions or if you have any issues, like I said, please call me. Okay, upflow, downflow, right flow, or left flow. So yes, this can be in a downflow. You will need that additional downflow installation kit. Important thing to remember with really any air conditioning system, but more so when you're dealing with inverter systems, don't forget to measure your static pressure. Make sure your ductwork is sealed. We have the filter rack that we use. You can use a 2-inch filter rack. You can use a 2-inch filter. So by all means, I would suggest using the 2-inch filter. It's going to be better for the homeowner. If you're looking for that return business, the homeowner is not going to be able to get 2-inch filters at Home Depot. So that they can, if you got them on a maintenance contract, 2-inch filters, by far they flow better. It's better for the homeowner, and it's going to keep that customer coming back. So that's definitely a bonus. Unless you don't want them coming back, that's another story. We all have those customers. Static pressure range is 0.8 on the 18,000 and 24,000 BTU, and static pressure is up to 1 inch. Now, doesn't mean this number doesn't mean this is what you want to achieve. This is the max you want to achieve. Ideally, we like to be half that, 0.4, 0.5 is where we like to keep our static pressure. That's just across the board, Rheem, Rude. Every system I've worked on, Train, Carrier, they all are shooting for that 0.5. So let's just try to make that a habit. I'm going to show you the best way to or the best place on this unit to put your return pressure probe, so that way you can get an accurate reading. Downflow, like I said before, when you do the downflow installation, when you do install a downflow installation kit, you will need to move the sensors. I'll show you where those, they do have the spaces, the empty slots for you to move the sensor from one port into the other, on the other side of the coil. And then you will also have to relocate that return air temperature sensor as well. Okay, let's see here, just another side view, and it's showing you more detailed information on where to relocate that the return air temperature sensor, because the return air temperature sensor is mounted on this little hole right here, and then you're going to move it over to the other side of the coil. The right flow application, you just basically got to pull the coil out and then move the drain pan over to the other side, and you're done. Pretty simple. But you do, like you said, like it shows here, important to move the coil inlet sensor to the holder on the right side. And then also all horizontal applications should include a full dimension secondary drain pan. You guys should all be familiar with that already. That's nothing new. Here's a little look at the terminals here. What I really want you to focus on here is that there's a terminal, it's going to be CN83. That is where you're going to use that pigtail. So the preferred method of hooking up a float switch is always going to be using a CN83 plug. So that way when there is an overflow situation, it's going to give you an overflow code. It's going to make your life a lot easier. Technicians have to spend less time trying to chase down an error code. It's going to give them the error code. They're going to be able to diagnose it and be on to the next call. These are your motor taps, and this is all in part of the installation manual. All this information, most of this information I'm getting, actually no, just about all the information that I've been giving you today is going to be found on the SamsungHVAC.com website. If you put in the model number, you search it up, you're going to be able to get the blower tables, the installation manual, the service manual, submittals, everything is going to be on that. The easiest way to navigate the site for me is to just go to SamsungHVAC.com, put the full model number into the search bar, search it, and then it's going to pull up your unit, and then you can get all the information you need. You have your different speed taps, and then it gives you here what the motor tap is and at what static pressure that you're going to be, the air you're going to be moving there. So this is definitely useful information. Troubleshooting. There is also technical bullets to help you or walk you through the troubleshooting. It's just like troubleshooting any X13 motor. Like it says here, if both high and low voltage measurements are correct and the motor does not run, the motor is defective. So you're basically looking for 24 volts from common to one of these speeds right here. And it's only going to call for low voltage on the speed it's using at that moment. So I'd recommend if you are going to do this, I just put the fan on, system off of cool, and then test it like that. Looking for your 24 volts. And that being said, you can use our Evergreen motors. If for some reason the motor goes bad and we don't have a Samsung replacement in stock, you will be able to use the Evergreen motor that we sell. I think last time I mentioned rescue motor, but we offer the Evergreen, and that's going to be the motor you're going to want to choose, of course, because we sell it. Okay, I do have another poll question. Nicole, if you could put that up, and this is going to be regarding the multi-position air handler in a FJM application. In your opinion, what would be the biggest advantage when using a multi-position air handler as part of a multi-zone system? Option one, making making zoning a home easier. Make heat pump inverter technology more affordable. Other, you could choose. There is no really right or wrong, because I think both of those are great answers. But if you have something else that you'd like to put in the chat box, please comment, because I'd like to see how contractors are going to be able to utilize a multi-position air handler in existing homes in the future. So it's going to be fun to me to see new jobs. Hopefully they're not like some of the pictures I showed you earlier. few minutes. A little bit of awkward silence, never hurt nobody.
All right, I'm going to close it.
Thank you. Can we? Oh, there we go. Yes, I totally agree. Zoning a home with the multi-position air handler. If you sat on one of my other talks or have talked to me personally, for my home, what I would like to do, if Samsung would donate a system to me, but we'll see. But what I would like to do is I have a 4-ton system. My house is not really laid out like this, but we can kind of use this as an example. I have a 4-ton system in my home, and the living room, dining room, kitchen area are like open. It's very open floor plan. That always stays comfortable. But my master bedroom, which is on the southwest corner of the home, and it kind of protrudes out, so it gets sun on both sides of the bedroom and the back wall all day long. It's always between 2 to 5 degrees warmer. If I could one day, to save up money and do it, I'd like to take the multi-position air handler, put a 2-ton multi-position air handler on my existing ductwork, just shut down the vents that go to the bedroom, and then put a high wall in each one of the 3 bedrooms. I could still have vents in the bathrooms, utilize on that multi-position air handler. My duct is already oversized for a 2-ton, so I'm not going to have any static pressure issues. And then I basically just zone my whole home, and every room can be comfortable. I have 2 bedrooms. My daughter, 80, she'd be comfortable like 78 degrees, so not really too big a deal. So I definitely would like to be able to utilize that in the future in my home, and I can see how you guys can make use of that as well, without having to mess with the ductwork. Okay. Here is a couple looks at the board. I wanted to show you guys this because this shows you the K buttons. I've had some people ask me where are the K buttons or what do they do. K buttons are going to offer different functions. If you don't have an SNET tool where you can plug your laptop to the unit, you can still get quite a bit of information off the board by utilizing the K buttons and putting it in test mode. And also, anytime you start up an FJA system, you're going to press that K1 button, and that's where you're going to address the system. As you can see right here, when you start up a multi-zone system, I get a lot of calls, and actually it's my favorite calls because it's the easiest call for me to handle is, hey, I got an E199. I basically tell them press the K1 button, and then it'll go right through the whole pipe check. When you're in a single zone application, if you're running a single zone, you can use a smart install feature. But if you have a multi-zone system, you don't want to utilize that smart install feature. You want to address the system. When you address the system, it will do a full checkup on the system. So there's no reason after you've addressed the system to do a smart install on a multi-zone FJM system that Samsung has. The auto addressing, here you go. This is what you're going to see. You're going to see AD02, and then you're going to see E199. It's just letting you know that you need to do the pipe check. And then it's going to run for maybe like 10 to 20 minutes. And then when it's done, it's going to give you a 0 and a sideways T. That sideways T is a K. Somebody thought that was a K, so that's what we're going to call it. So you're going to get a 0K or 0 sideways T, and that's basically saying, okay, everything's okay. Then it's going to show you your indoor unit, and it's going to flash 8000. That's going to be unit number A. 80001 would be unit number B, and 2, C, 3, D, and so on. Then after you start up the system, it's always a good idea to go ahead and just go to each system and just verify each zone is working properly. And you can do that by just following these directions here. You turn all the units on a fan only mode, and then you just set one at a time to cooling mode, and you get your delta T across those coils, whether you're doing it in heat or cool. Those K buttons, K1, now this is not universal. You always want to revert back to the installation manual, because this does change depending on the FGM or single zone or the DVM systems. But for the most part, they're pretty close. For this, just for the demonstration purposes, we're just going to kind of go over this. K1, you press it once, that's going to be your pipe check. You press it twice, and these are quick presses. These are not long hold presses. Quick time, press it 2 times quickly. Cool mode, it's going to run test cool mode. 3 times, test heat. 4 times if you want to do a pump down, and then 5 times, which is going to end that. It's going to just get you out of there. And then your K2 button, your number of presses, you hold for 3 seconds. And it's going to give you all the operation parameters, which I'm going to show you right here. K3 is an important because that's basically a reset and exit. If you're in a menu and you don't know how to get out of it, you press K3, it'll take you out of that menu. If you have an error code, you hit the K3 button, and that will erase the error code. If it's a serious error code, it may pop right back up. But if it's not, and it's just a random code, you hit K3 button, it will take care of it. And that is universal across all the Samsung brand. Across all the Samsung units. The K3 button is a reset. And here is the K4 button, depending on how many times you press it. You got your compressor frequency, your EEV, how open it is, your condenser temperatures, your outdoor temperature. If you're not sure the outdoor temperature sensor is working properly, you can see what it's reading. It is going to read in Celsius. I do believe the new units, as they come out this year, they're going to start reading in Fahrenheit, so that's going to be helpful. You're not going to have to convert it. It's going to give you discharge temperature, and just basically all the information, well, not all the information, but a good amount of information that you're going to be able to help you diagnose the system. And that's it. That is the end of trail for this PowerPoint. Now we're going to go ahead, and I want to go to my camera. Do I have to stop sharing first?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. And if we can make my camera the main camera here. Perfect. All right. So you got the board here. You have your line voltage connection. And then you have your different connections here. Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. So your F1, your F2, that's going to be going to your condenser. And then your V1, V2, these are for accessories. That could be its own separate class on itself, especially going into detail on some of the settings with the advanced wire controller. There are so many different functions that you guys can access. One function that you're going to want to set up as after you do the let me rephrase this. Let me start again. First thing, when you install one of these multi-position air handlers, you're going to want to go ahead and you want to tap into plug CN83, and that's going to be your float switch. When you go into the menu and you start programming and setting up the float switch, because the board is not set up to see that float switch from factory, you have to go into the installer options and activate that. When you activate that, the next thing you should activate is the fan thermal on and thermal off. What that means is, as I mentioned before, this is basically like a high wall unit. So high wall units, what do? They run their fan continuously. Down here in the South Florida or Florida in general, we have high humidity. We don't want to run the fan continuously. And this also applies to the high wall units. If you have a high wall unit and you want to shut that fan off when it reaches temperature, you can do that. But when installing these multi-position air handlers, you definitely want to make sure after you set up your float switch and in the installer options that you go ahead and you go to the fan settings, and you set the fan to shut off on thermal off. That's what you're going to be looking for, thermal off. And I think in the fall, I'm going to do a Tim talk. That one's probably going to run about an hour and a half at least. And I want to go through all the settings and functions on a working thermostat and walk you guys through how to change each function, because I think that's something that we can spend plenty of time in, and have a live thermostat to show you exactly how it's done. So that's hopefully something I can have done for you guys in the fall. But as I was mentioning, the V1 and V2, that's something that you're going to use for Samsung accessories. That is, like I said, a whole nother class on itself. Your F3 and F4, that is your thermostat, your wired controller. When you look through here, you see your transformer. Your installers are going to be tempted to break red for the float switch. Do not break red on the float switch. But just like any other transformer, it's a 208, 230 transformer. You want to check your voltage, and you want to set the transformer according to the voltage that you have at the home. If it's commercial, chances are you're going to have 208, so you want to make sure that you set that up. As you can see here, I'm going to point it out again. Your CN83, that's your plug. You're going to take the plug that's going to be included in this multi-position air handler, and you're going to plug it in there. On that little harness, there's going to be 2 plugs. You can basically cut that in half, and you can utilize that for a high wall system or another system. If you're installing a lot of these, it's always good to have a backup plug just in case you come across one that doesn't have it. And then, like I said, you're going to go into the functions, and you're going to, in the installer menu, you're going to want to go ahead and activate that. I'm going to move you guys down here and look at the
little closer look at the blower. As you can see, there is a schematic on the back of the blower. So it has full schematic for you guys to be able to check out. It's going to tell you your speeds. And as I mentioned before, this is where you're going to test your motor. You have, just like any X13 motor, you're going to get a 24-volt call that's going to activate that motor. If you got power, you got a ground, and you got line voltage going to this, you want to make sure that you check it. If you have 24 volts going to the module and the motor's not coming on, then replace the module. If the motor is running nonstop and you don't have 24 volts, then the motor's no good. I just had a call the other day where the motor wouldn't stop running and it wasn't getting a 24-volt call. Replace the motor and module. We don't, with the Samsung, it's going to be motor module replacement. It's not going to be a module only replacement. I'm going to move you down here, go further. I know I don't have the head cam, so I apologize. But this is going to make it easier for me today. You have a port here. If you need to access the system, there is a Schrader in that port. As I mentioned earlier, you have your sensors. And then if you see down here, this is an empty spot for a sensor. So depending on the situation, or is right flow, left flow, down flow, this is going to be utilized in one of those applications when you're converting it. There was a workaround that I told you guys about earlier. If for some reason you don't have the plug for the CN83, your return air temperature sensor is right here. You just follow this up to the top and you'll see the wires, and you would go ahead and you run your float switch in line with the return air temperature sensor. Now, if you are converting this into a downflow, you're going to move the return air temperature sensor from here. In the downflow kit, it'll give you a bracket. You'll be able to install it and move that return air temperature sensor to the top, to the other side of the coil. If you notice, no expansion valve. I haven't cut one of these apart yet, so I'm not sure if there's a screen in there. But regardless, as you can see, these are just sealed fittings, which is great. You could cut these and you can braze them, but please, 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 low flow nitrogen. If you're not going to low flow nitrogen, try to at least blow nitro through the system after, or flush the system after. We don't want any of that debris, that build up from brazing, to get caught into a potential screen here, or clog any of the system up at all. As you can see, this is your horizontal drain pan. This is basically going to just move to the other side. The cover has plenty of ports. You're not going to have to drill anything out in order to have access for these fittings. When the covers were on, if you guys saw the last one, you have all your cutouts. You don't have to switch over a plate. Everything is set up for you. You have ports on either side. So if you're putting this into an existing application, you can go to the left, you can go to the right. As you can see, main drain is lower, auxiliary is higher. It makes life very easy. When you do your static pressure test, we're going to put our supply pressure probe above the unit, obviously. What I would recommend doing is, if you want, you can drill out one of these holes a little further, get your probe in there. I would recommend going in the middle here, just drilling out a hole. This isn't really just to keep the bottom from spreading apart, so you're not doing any damage to the structure of the cabinet by drilling a hole in here. Drill a hole here. That way you're going to get true static pressure with the filter. You always want to measure what's in the box. If this unit did not come designed with the filter, then we don't want that filter to be, basically what I'm saying is, we want to make sure that probe is in between the unit and the filter. That makes sense. I get tied up in my words sometimes. This is the filter rack that I recommend using, because this does accept that 2-inch filter. There are rails in here. These rails slide out. When you slide these rails, let me move this down right here. When you slide these rails out, there's a rail on this side and that side. When you slide them out, you can use a this is a 21 by 21 filter rack. It utilizes a 20 by 20 filter by 2 filter. So by all means, please use that 2-inch filter. It's just going to save you headache down the road. And as I mentioned before, static pressure is one of your most, it's your worst enemy when it comes to inverter systems. Now I'm just going to show you the, let's see if we get that there. This is your advanced wire controller. As you can see, very simple. It has a nice light display. Unfortunately, I was not able to get this system to power up for you guys today. Next when we do the, if I do that talk in the fall, then I'm definitely going to have this powered up, and we're going to walk through everything step by step. I want to make sure you guys prepare time for that, because I don't want to rush through and breeze through, because I think there's a lot of information that I'm going to be able to share with you guys, but at least you guys are getting an idea of what this looks like. Very simple. It's a good looking thermostat. So if you have a homeowner that is just like, oh, I want a Nest because I like the way it looks, you may want to show them what this looks like. It's a very nice, sleek thermostat. It doesn't stick off far from the wall. And in the back of it, as you can see right here, you have, these are your F3 and F4 connections. And this is where that's the only place you're going to hook up power to your, to the thermostat. And that's going to power up the thermostat, and it's going to send a signal back and forth. One thing I do want to note, when using communication wire from the condenser to the air handler, Samsung wants us to use the stranded shielded communication wire. But if you're putting this in a home and you're doing a change out and you have regular 16.5 T-stat wire that's going to where the thermostat is, it is 100% acceptable to utilize that existing thermostat wire when wiring in an advanced wire controller. One of the reasons being is this isn't a continuous communication back and forth from like it is between the condenser and the air handler. So I have been told many times by several of the guys at Samsung that by all means you can use a standard thermostat wire if that's what is there. So if you're installing this and you're replacing an existing system and you just can't find a way to run the 16.2 stranded shielded wire, it is acceptable to use the standard 65 T-stat wire that's already run to that existing thermostat. Is it recommended or preferred? I would rather you see I'd rather see you use the stranded shielded wire going to not just between the indoor and outdoor communication, but also to the advanced wire controller. But as I mentioned, it is acceptable if that's what you got. So that makes your life a little easier. You don't have to worry about that so much, especially if you're going in a change out application and you're going behind another unit. So that's something that make your guys' life a little easier in the future. As far as that, I think that's about it. Is there any questions? And I know I breezed through a lot of this because there really is a lot of information to give you guys. In all reality, a lot of these I could probably break up into 1-hour segments, but unfortunately, you guys got to get to work and make money, right? Any questions or any comments?
No questions in the chat box. Anybody have any questions? Type them on in. Tim's here, and Tim is, as you know, has offered himself up multiple times.
Yep.
So if you want his help during your first installation, he can be your phone a friend and help you get through that.
I want to show you something real quick. I don't know if you guys knew this, but on these, can you see that light?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So that works. You can't see that with your naked eye, but if you have a system, a high wall system, 4-week set, anywhere where you have, and it's really is across the board. It even works on the Cooper Hunters. You would need to use your cell phone. You guys are able to see it because I'm using my webcam, but you can see that light. That's just a way to test the remote. If you have a homeowner that's like, hey, my remote doesn't work, it's not operating the system, you can always just say, hey, listen, take your cell phone out, open the camera. They may need to go into a dark room and have them press the power button repeatedly while they're facing the camera. And if they say they're getting a light there, then at least you can rule out the wireless remote as the problem. You may need to get a new a receiver for the high wall system or 4-way cassette. So just a little, tech tip for you guys.
All right, everybody, guys ready? Question 1, what's the preferred method to wire an auxiliary overflow safety switch? A, break red on the transformer. B, wire the float switch in series on the return air thermistor. C, the overflow safety switch is already pre-installed. There's no need to do anything. Or D, utilize the included Molex connector and then plug it into CN83 on the board.
Select D, which is the correct answer. Utilize the included Molex connector and plug it into CN83.
Question number 2, what is the external static pressure rating on a 2-ton Samsung multi-position air handler? A, 0.8 WC, B, 0.5 WC, C, 0.3 WC, D, 1.0 WC.
With A, 8 inches.
Number 3, true or false, when installing an advanced controller on a Samsung multi-position air handler, the standard 16.5 thermostat wire is acceptable.
A, true, because Tim just told you that. He would tell you his preferred method would be to use the 16.2 stranded if you can, but if you can't, it is perfectly acceptable. Acceptable being the key word that we are focusing in on.
All right, question number 4, the final one. True or false, the line voltage supplied to a Samsung multi-position air handler must be run independently of the condenser and on its own separate circuit.
And the answer to that one is B, false. And Tim's comment there is important that the line voltage for the multi-positional air handler is supplied from the condenser, and it is as it is part of the communication circuit. That is the explanation to that one. So Roger, congratulations. There's his Vanna White hands. Awesome. All right, guys, any last questions for Tim? Remember, you're going to get a copy of this presentation for future reference. I know there's a lot of charts in there and a lot of information. Made my head hurt a little bit. I'm sure it did for you as well.
Another thing I want to add is that I'm going to be tagging along on quite a few of the stops for the mobile trailer. So I hope to see some of you guys out there. If I do, feel free to pick my brain or, you know, laugh about some past jobs that, like some of the pictures I've shared with you that we've had, unfortunately, but I look forward to meeting you guys there and answer whatever questions I can.
Yeah, I would highly recommend that you guys come. That is a great place to learn about all the technology that Samsung has, not just the stuff that we stock. We do have access to pretty much the entire Samsung line. So if there's any applications that are special and need a special solution, those are things that we can order in for you guys as a special order. All right, we will see you next time, guys. Thanks for coming.